signal now for when I'm needed. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning to them.
Yes, sir. Welcome to the Gotham Chronicles Beyond the Bat Signal. I am your host, Dominic Unica. Join me as we dive into the depths of Batman's lore, dissecting the Rogues Gallery, and uncovering the stories of our iconic vigilante known as the Dark Knight. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode, where we're going to discuss episode 5 of The Penguin, called Homecoming. I immediately think of Kanye's song. But before we begin, I want to thank every single one of the listeners who are tuning in and new listeners that are tuning in. Noticing ones, especially within the US. So there's been quite a few from, I think it was Delaware. Delaware was one of them, and then there was actually a couple from Virginia, and then as well as Boston area, Georgia. I know within the state of, I'm not sure if I mentioned Maryland and Virginia and Illinois. Good old Chicago. I'm assuming Chicago. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, write in, shoot me an email. District of Columbia, but there's quite a few, and if I'm forgetting any, and I know Georgia was another. And then I got to give a shout out to California, and then even from the peeps, my home country of Canada, where, and it was funny when I was talking to Pete Vera. I'm not sure if this was on the cast, but we were talking about accents. But I guess those from Toronto, we pronounce our O's a little differently, and he's from the New York area, so kind of curious if we really do sound that different. I'm not sure. I find that those from Buffalo, they have a little bit more of an accent, and even from New Jersey. But then it's kind of funny. It's like you're told you have an accent, and then it's like all of a sudden you're like, what? I have an accent? You have an accent. Anyway, going on a tangent. Thank you so much for tuning in, even from across the world, in the UK, Bangladesh, Brazil. Honestly, thank you so much. As I have my dog who's barking at me right now. This is lovely. And, yeah, thank you so much. It means a lot. Listen, it means so much. If you can, and you have the time, please rate and review the show. Tell me what you think. Feedback is always welcome. And speaking of feedback, you can always write in at beyondthebatsignal@gmail.com. Or shoot me a message on X/Twitter. Yeah, I'm still not going away from calling it Twitter. It's at Beyond Bat Signal. So there's no the. It's just Beyond the Bat. See, I already screwed it up. Beyond Bat Signal. Now, with all that being said, we are going to discuss, and I hope it's not a long one, The Penguin episode 5, where this takes off pretty much with Oz taking off with Victor, and Oz just pretty much lights up that Maserati, and he is singing the praises to Victor for saving his life. And that purple Maserati, man, it's gone. Blew it to pieces, and right away Oz has already got people under him where he's going to be working with, and that's where the show kind of kicks off. And Victor, you can kind of tell that he's going to be having a bit more of a bigger role. So like one of the big things that you notice is like, I think the one key guy that Oz truly trusts is Victor. So he obviously, one of the big requests was he has to take care of Oz's mom, or as he likes to call it, Ma. And that's a big request. And the one, I think, thing like that he said was like, you need to find a place, we need to get my mom out of the house, and we need to basically, I'm paraphrasing all here, but we have to find her a place that no one will guess as to where anyone can find us. Nowhere. Oz is also planning, it's like a power grab right here, right? So like he shows Oz shows Victor, he opens up TikTok, and it's like, what, about it, TikTok. Maroney's son, Taj Maroney. So basically, like, you see this guy, he seems like he's like one of the influencers on TikTok, and obviously he's the son of mob boss Sal Maroney. So basically, Oz is using Taj, and he's showing Victor this. He's like, we're going to use Taj as hostage, basically, right? And they go into this tattoo parlor where he's getting this like tattoo of like, it looks like a phoenix, not fully done. And right away, you got Victor who's chasing after him and brings him down, knocks him out, right? That was one key thing that Victor also did. And all of it was because right now the Maronis have all the mushrooms. And this was capture Taj, and then we'll do a straight exchange. We'll have the shrooms for Taj. So Oz obviously pays a visit to Sal Maroney at Blackgate, proposes a deal with Sal, and is like, listen, I have your son, shows him a picture, and is like, we'll do a straight exchange, the shrooms for your son. And wants just the wife there, that's it. But obviously Sal's turning that down. He's like, no, she's going to be accompanied by someone. So he's like, okay. We notice that Eve. So Eve right now, like one of the next scenes is Eve, and she obviously wants no part of this. She doesn't like. She knows that there's a target that's going to be on her back, simply because we got Oz, who's, he's making big moves. Right? Like he is attacking not just the Falcones, but he's also attacking the Maronis, and he's trying to take power. So, they're obviously going to try to target where the heart is, and Oz knows it. So does Eve. Eve knows that she's going to have a target on her back. Oz knows that his mom's going to probably have a target on her back, which is why he wants Victor to get her moving, get out. So they bring it to this exchange. Okay, so they have Taj, and Taj is just like, you could tell that there's just liquid all over him, and what looks like kind of like water. At least we're made to believe, right? And he's waddling like a penguin because he's got his wrists tied up and his ankles tied up. And they meet in this, like, I guess industrial looking spot. And the wife of Sal Maroney's there, and they try to do an exchange. But it's never always like that. Gunmen come out as soon as the kid gets back to his mom, and they start shooting, right? And then all of a sudden, Oz just lights up a match and just drops it to the ground. And every drop was kerosene that led right from where Oz was straight to where the mother and son was of the Maronis. And they burn alive. And you can hear the screams. And Oz is just enjoying every single second of it. And has a nice little smile. So right there, you know that this guy is gruesome. He doesn't care. He is a savage. And I mean, talk about a money shot of watching this guy get so giddy. Not necessarily giddy, but he had a nice smile on this. Like, oh man, like that, it was traumatizing to watch. And I myself had to turn away and be like, wow, like no way. And the one thing is, if we didn't know who exactly the Penguin was up until that point, I think right there was a statement as to watching two people burn right before his eyes, and he's just smiling. Now, while Penguin's making moves, so is Sofia, right? Like we leave off last episode where she completely gasses her entire family with the exception of two, with the obvious one being the little girl and Johnny Vitti, right? And she just kind of taps him on the foot and says, like paraphrasing here, "Hey Johnny, we got some talking to do." And so she has him locked up in it's the downstairs chamber where you'll see like it's her father, her mother, and her brother that are buried in the wall. And she just reminds him it's pretty cold down here, and then she douses him with cold water. And what she's wanting is money of where it's hidden, and that's all she wants to know. And she's reminding him, like, listen, it gets pretty cold down here at nighttime. Johnny, though, has a few things up his sleeve. And it's not like it's extremely clever or anything, but like, just to kind of get under her skin. But he just tells her, like, listen, I was your mom's cousin, and if there's one thing I know was your mom, the day before she died, was trying to leave Carmine, your father, and she was going to take you and your brother with her. But she stayed. She turned around and stayed. And he's like, I was trying to help her out, and she stayed because of you kids. And he kind of put the blame on her. And obviously she wasn't buying the bait, and she was just going to let him stay there and freeze. Now, obviously, the next scene we see that he obviously took the bait. He caves, and he tells her exactly where the money is, and you see a nice, huge stash of cash with a bunch of men that she doesn't really know, right? But it looks like Johnny kind of hooked it up, and they obviously worked for Carmine, as she mentions, right? And she was saying, like, reminded these guys, like, all of you sacrificed your lives for my father, and what did you get out of it? You guys were just pawns. That's all you are. And then she wanted to show how she would treat them, which in my head was brilliant, right? Like I've said since day one, I keep on saying it to my wife, Victoria, where I'm just like, she is a brilliant character, very smart and ruthless. And sure enough, she throws the cash right on there. And she's wearing her mom's, it looks like a fur jacket. And while she's looking, she's opening it up, and she notices right inside one of at the side pocket, or it looks like it, but it's in the inside of the jacket. It says, Isabella Gigante. And then not only that, she's also ending the Falcone line and starting a new mob under her mother's maiden name of Gigante. So right away, Johnny's just dismissing Sofia in the middle of her speech, trying to just kind of take control of this meeting out of nowhere. And like, this is where she just grabs control right back, takes the gun and blasts him right in the head. Done. He is dead, and that is it. The bullet went right through his skull, and he's dead. So she gets this bag of money and just basically throws it into like that blood pool right near Johnny's head, and throws it up on the table where all the gangsters are. And she's and one of them is like about to reach. She's like, "Go ahead, that's all yours anyway," And basically just reminding them that like all of you have slaves for my father, but like here we're all gonna benefit from working together in this new family. So Falcones are dead, basically, and she's saying this is a brand new family name, the Gigante family. And I love it. But there was one thing I forgot to point out, and if you ever listen, I highly recommend you do, go over to Batman on Films podcast. Bill, Jet Ramy, and you got Pete Vera, who's been on the show, and same one with Ryan Lauer. Anyway, they love it. And the one is Mackenzie Bach. So Chief Mackenzie Bach makes an appearance on this episode, and I love it. This guy's voice is like, you'll hear those guys on BOF where they'll be like, "Oh, you son of a bitch," right? They got the voice down pat. And that voice, like, so he obviously makes an appearance near the beginning of the show, kind of just like, semi accusing Sofia, like, "Oh, you don't know what happened. Why you're the only survivor." the serial killer is the only survivor. And she obviously plays stupid and then just kind of throws it right back at him, where she's like, what? You're here, this is out of your jurisdiction, and what are you here for? And just because you're not going to get any side money from my father anymore. So obviously she's kind of saying, like, you're snooping around. Now, do I think that he's probably one of the bad cops? I didn't get that vibe, not from the Batman. He seemed like he was one of the good ones. But great to hear his voice, and and it is all about the voice, like that delivery, where just the way he talks. It's man, I could hear it all day. But anyway, so it was nice for him to make a quick appearance, and I'm expecting him to show up in the Batman Part 2. He is Chief at the end of the day, unless something happens by now until episode 8. But we'll see. But anyway, he makes an accusation towards Sofia, and she's just not biting whatsoever. Anyway, Sofia, she's got full control. Like, her family is completely dead with Johnny Viti's gone. And right now, I would say, like, the next move comes down to where the Penguin's trying to basically execute Sal. So he gives some money to one of the guards, and I guess the money was used to go and kill Sal. So the guy goes in, or the guard goes in and stabs Sal Maroni. And then the scene just kind of turns away. But Penguin gets a call from Sal Maroni, and he's obviously in excruciating pain. But he calls him and says, like, you were trying to kill me. You're on my radar, basically. And Sal kind of says, I forget the line, it's driving me nuts, but Penguin just basically tells him, yeah, well, I burned you, and I burned your wife and son too. Try calling her. And I just thought, what a savage. Like, this Penguin character does not care. And I love it. Like, it's completely different from any, like, the Danny DeVito, right? Just absolute, like, ruthless. I love it. This is exactly the type of Penguin I like. So Sal's sitting in his, like, little wooden cabin, and then, you have Sofia who's making her play. So she goes and pays Sal a nice little visit. And she's like, I'm here, but I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to make an alliance. Like, even Sofia, she just praises Sal for, like, just how he treated family. She's basically saying, getting it right, and tells him, like, basically, she's saying, like, both her and Sal have been screwed over by Oz, and she basically wants to just end this war between both families and target Oz, right? So offering Sal an alliance between the Maronis and the Gigantes, where they'll work together and basically take over Gotham, right? So, it's not necessarily that it's like you're shown, but you're kind of like, yeah, they're gonna agree on this and try to take Oz down. Now, when it comes to Victor going back, he was told to take care of Oz's mom, Frances, right? So what Vic does is he actually brings Frances, Oz's mom, to Crown Point. And Crown Point is where Vic was from, right? And I'm pretty sure, like, Oz even mentions it. And actually, I know it's mentioned in this episode where that's where Oz grew up. But Vic, that's where his family passed, like, they got killed in that big explosion where, all the water was coming through. That's where Vic's family died, right? And that's where he grew up. And that was the place that he brought Frances, right? And, there was someone that Vic spotted, and he's like, oh my God, man, he's not a good person. He's not a good dude. He's not a good dude. And he's kind of panicking. So he's trying to be quiet and, like, I'd say, stealth of bringing Frances up into this condo building. And it's none other than Squid, if you remember a couple of episodes ago, it was basically a Victor episode where they kind of just talk about, what his life was like with his girlfriend, what life was like, even amongst his friends. And then you see that he was buddies with, well, not necessarily buddies. He didn't like him. He didn't want to hang out with him, but his name was Squid, and he was up to no good. And you can tell that Squid's just trying to take over that little area of Crown Point. And so Vic is bringing Francis into this condo, and then one of the last shots you see is of Vic bringing Francis in. Squid notices it, right? And he's just, I don't know if he was smoking, but he's just like, okay. And he knew exactly who that was. So kind of curious as to where that arc kind of goes. Another thing, and I'm not sure where this is going to go. I'll be honest, I wasn't a big fan of this, but then I'm like, I'm going to hold my breath on this one because I want to see the direction that it ends up, if it pays off. But Julian Rush visits Sofia, and this is the scene where she's looking at the fur coat, and then she sees Isabella Gigante's name inside that fur coat. And Julian Rush just kind of walks in there and says, I want to join whatever it is that you're doing. Now, I'm not sure where this is going to go, but Julian Rush basically just pledges his allegiance to Sofia and says, like, listen, I'm going to join you. And, he even said, like, the police came to visit me and I kept quiet. So she's like, okay, well, right now I can trust you for now. And then you even see him sitting, or he's at the table. I'm not sure if he was sitting, but when John Vitti got just popped. So that'll be an interesting little arc as well. And now the thing is like, I see the point where, she trusts him. She's familiar with him. There's more to this guy, but it just kind of felt like it didn't fit. But that's just my opinion, right? Like, you could tell that he is infatuated by Sofia, and I'm not sure she feels the exact same way. But who knows? I could be wrong. Again, we got 3 more episodes to go. So, which is kind of sad. I'm not going to lie. I've enjoyed this ride. But yeah, I thought that this episode was an absolute banger. And I said to my wife, I was just like, you know what? This was an episode that was absolutely fire. And I mean that pun intended. But at the same time, no doubt, like, this is another A+ episode. It is also a setup episode. Like, there was big chess pieces that were being moved. And, like, there's big questions, like, that need to be answered, right? Like, one of the big things was, like, what's going to happen? Like, is it going to be the Maronis and Gigantes? Are they going to sustain? They're going to break apart? Like, how is this going to go down? You still see the insecurity of Oz, right? Like, he's got this fear of people leaving him. He doesn't like it. And he kind of alludes to his brothers dying, right? And it's like the city took him. And, the way the show kind of ends off, it's almost like we got Penguin's lair. I kind of feel like this is all connected to the Batman, because if you remember the Batman, his cave was just underneath Wayne Tower. So it's right, like, it looks like a train station as to where he enters. And this is the same thing. Like, it's like a subway spot, and it connects a lot of Gotham. And basically, when Vic is going through, like, it was Oz. He was going through some of the things that his mom brought. Like, he opens up these coins, throws it, and then he sees, like, this little token, and it gives him an idea. So he goes down with Vic. They break a couple walls down, which are just, flimsy pieces of wood. And then they enter, and it's like this underground lair. And Oz says to Vic, like, listen, Vic, it might be dark, but you know what it's humid down here. And you know what that's good for? And it's good for the shrooms, because the shrooms can grow. And as you know, I didn't even mention this. I completely forgot. But, like, in the scene where you're watching Taj and his mother get burned to hell, basically, all of a sudden it looks like it's not even like the showers that come. It looks like fire extinguishers that are coming from above. And we're reminded for that, like those shrooms, any temperature change, those shrooms are very sensitive to temperature change. So a lot of them did not last with the exception of two small little buckets. So obviously Oz is going to capitalize on that and try to grow these shrooms and try to sell them off, right, in this lair. And it looks huge. And he loves this spot because he thinks no one's going to look here. No one at all, right? Very curious to see if squid plays a factor in this. But I don't know. Like, we'll really see, like, even, in terms of even character development within this episode, right? Like, you're seeing a lot of growth from Oz, like, just, he's a smart guy. Like, the guy thinks on his feet. But, like, how's his arc going to basically evolve? Like, you see him make big moves in this episode, right? Huge leaps. And he does not care. And it's almost like he's got to be a savage. And it's like, his mom obviously is proud of him. And I think it's to prove something to his mom, right? Now, is he ruthless or is he strategic? I think he's a bit of both. And then, from even like characters like Sofia Gigante now, like she makes a huge power move. And I'm so curious as to where this leads. Like, who's going to survive? Who's going to die? Or is this all going to lead into Batman Part 2? But even the Alliance, where we'll see a bit more of Clancy Brown's character, Sal Maroni, like he's going to be another big part of this, right? And where are they going to go, right? Because the Maronis and Falcones never got along, and all of a sudden, going forward, they are. It's going to be about loyalty. And then even like in terms of the atmosphere. So based on where Vic brought Oz's mom, Frances, she said it's like this was like a hellhole for her. She hated it. And, even Oz was saying like, bringing her to paradise and, obviously they don't want to live there, but it's going to be short term. But like just seeing the visuals and the cinematography and just how they're kind of expressing this to the viewer, where it is grungy, it is completely forgotten about. And that massive flooding completely annihilated that area of the city, right? And it seems like it's forgotten about. And then some of the big themes, like, how survival, like who's going to survive, right? Like going forward, the big targets on the back are going to be Oz's mom. Like, obviously it's going to be Oz and Victor, but like who else? Oz's mom is going to be one of them, and Eve is going to be another. And what if something happens to them? Because he obviously, as a character, does not like when people leave him, right? He takes that personally. And you could see how upset he got by throwing a flower pot across the room when Eve said, like, I'm not going to be joining you. I'm not going to come with you to wherever you're going, right? And right away, Oz is like, are you going for some other man, right? He doesn't like that feeling of just being alone, being like someone leaving him. So I'm kind of curious as to how he responds because he is a sensitive individual. But there's no doubt that I think Penguin's going to have a much bigger arc. Like right now, this is a Penguin series, and I always keep thinking about like how's this going to fit in the broader spectrum with Batman involved. But like, what's funny is while I'm watching this, I don't think about Batman whatsoever. I'm so drawn to every single character, and each of them have brought their A game. Like they're so good. Like the way Kristen Milotti and Colin Farrell, just I think it's every single scene is just it's a scene grabber, like it's a showstopper. They're so good, right? And you're completely like, I don't pick up my phone once while I'm watching this show, right? Like I feel like a lot of us tend to, if we're getting bored, immediately we reach for the phone. Not once do I even think about picking up my phone, right? I'm just like trying to like take in every single scene, because that's the one thing about this show. Every single scene matters. Every single frame matters. And like, everyone that's involved into this episode or this show brings it. Like, I don't think in terms of Homecoming, it doesn't waste a single millisecond into like, oh well, this is just going to be a filler scene. It doesn't. Nothing is wasted. I think the episode comes close to an hour. It was obviously not obviously, but it was directed by Helen Shaver and writers Brianna Gibson and Shay Ogbonna, and they did an excellent job. For episode 5, I don't think it's going to be. It would have been really difficult to follow up with episode 4, and that was just like, what was it? Where Sofia just kind of, that's a Sofia episode, right? Cent'anni is what it was called, and I thought that there was huge moves from all the big characters. And right away, I'm like, well, what's going to happen next, right? Like, what's episode 6 going to bring? What about 7? And how's it going to end off, right? Who's going to survive? Who's going to die, right? What's this lair that Penguin's got going? How are the Maronis and the Gigantes going to get along? What's going to happen with Francis Cobb and Eve, right? How are the drugs going to get moved? How does this all fit into the bigger picture? I don't know. I just think that, in terms of pacing, the episode was top notch. I was never bored for a second. And to be honest, I haven't been bored once watching this series. I thought that the violence that this show brought, and it sounds kind of disgusting to say, but like the way that they kind of showcased this was brilliant. And it totally fits the character of the Penguin, and even like, with the mob bosses. But Clancy Brown, I thought, he doesn't get a lot of screen time, but man, this guy's an A+ actor. Like, in terms of the level of skill that he's got, I'm just bought into what this guy brings every single second. Same thing with, like, we talk a lot about Kristen Milotti, Colin Farrell, but like, even these supporting actors and actresses, they're just fantastic. John Vitti, the guy who plays John Vitti, his name's slipping my mind. Sure, he's a great human being, but man, the way he acted, you grew to just loathe John Vitti. Couldn't stand the guy, and when he got popped, I was like, good, the guy deserves it. Anyway, I'm gonna give this episode a 9 out of 10. Last week's episode would have been a 10 out of 10, I think. I don't even know if I gave it a rating, A+. This would have been an A. And let me tell you, it comes close to last week's episode. I have no idea what to expect from next week, but I am jacked up for it. Now, that is going to be all for this week's episode. I know coming up should be, I'm going to be obviously reviewing episode 6, hopefully talking about it either Monday or Tuesday, and then dropping on Wednesday. And I am also going to be reviewing Batman The Last Halloween, which pretty sure book number 2 comes out on October 30th, so I'm pretty stoked about that. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I highly recommend, because man, The Last Halloween issue 1 was bomb. Now, with that being said, this is Beyond the Bat Signal. Feel free to follow along on X/Twitter at Beyond Bat Signal, or if you have any comments, questions, concerns, shoot me an email, beyondthebatsignal@gmail.com. You can find it in the show notes as well. And please, if you have time, if you have a couple minutes, rate and review the show on Apple, Spotify, or if you listen to podcasts. And because I'd be so happy to hear from you. And if you do, and leave 5 stars, I will happily read your review on the show. So, my name is Dominic Yanika, and this is Beyond the Bat Signal, signing off.